And then comes the great Day of Atonement. It's the high point of the Israelite year at the sanctuary. It's the day when God would eliminate sin forever. Its description is placed in the thematic and structural center of the book of Leviticus, in effect, in the center of the entire Pentateuch. It is the completion of a two-phase process of atonement. The first phase is the phase when the Israelite sins and ritual impurities were transferred onto the sanctuary and its priests. That was mainly done by the ritual of purification. Sometimes when a sinner would commit a sin in rebellion against God, that sin would also impure the sanctuary. And then on the Day of Atonement, God would take care of all these sins and would eradicate them in a process which makes sure that each and every sentence of God would be correct, fair, and just, so that in the end, God would be justified. That's what the Day of Atonement is about. Justification of God, eradication of sin, and the final sealing of the good fate of the believers. Now, on the Day of Atonement, there were three parts to that ritual. The first part would be a purification offering for the priest and his house, which would make sure that the priest and his house would receive atonement. The second part would be introduced by choosing between two animals. 2 goats are brought to the sanctuary, and 1 goat would be for Azazel, and 1 goat for Yahweh. So the goat for Yahweh would be sacrificed, and its blood, which is not contaminated by sin, because there was no laying on hands involved with that ritual, that blood, purifying blood, would be brought into the sanctuary, and from the inside out, sanctuary would be cleansed. The idea which the Israelites should receive by that is that when God puts away sin forever, it will start at the ark, at the throne, at the mercy seat. And then from God himself, it would go through the entire sanctuary. In fact, it would even continue through the encampment, and sin would be brought out far away from the Israelites. That is the third part of the ritual on the Day of Atonement. It is an elimination ritual. The high priest would lay all sins on the goat for Azazel, and that goat would be led into the wilderness, and there he would probably die somewhere far remote from Israel. The ritual with the goat of Azazel is not a sacrifice. In fact, the goat is never called a sacrifice. It's not even slaughtered. And the ritual itself only happens after the sanctuary has been cleansed, after it is purified and the people have received atonement. So this ritual is called an elimination ritual. It should bring sin away from the Israelite camp. And it is transferred onto Azazel in a punishing way. Azazel is here obviously the opposite to Yahweh. There's Yahweh who dies for the sin, but there is Azazel who will receive the sin and dies because he is the originator of the sin. He is the one who accuses the believers of their sins they did, and as such a witness, as a malicious witness, he has to carry the sentence which he wants the believers to receive. Well, what are the people doing on the Day of Atonement then? Because this is all done by the high priest. What is the task of the people? Well, the people have to come to the sanctuary. They have to be there, they have to observe, they have to focus on what the high priest is doing for them, and they have to humble their souls. To humble their souls means, in the Jewish tradition, that they fast, they pray, they confess their sins, and then they would be cleansed. So the people's attention is totally on God. They are loyal to God. This is important. What would happen to somebody who would not adhere to what is required to do on the Day of Atonement? He would be cut off from the people. So there are 4 aspects of the Day of Atonement. Number 1, the forgiven sinner who received forgiveness during the year and who is loyal on the Day of Atonement, he will be justified. In fact, his justification will be fixed and secured for eternity. Number 2, the forgiven sinner who has received forgiveness during the year but who is not loyal on the Day of Atonement, he will be cut off from the people. Number 3, the originator of sin will receive the sin and he will be punished forever. And number 4, God himself will be justified in all of his dealings, which he does during the second phase of that atonement process. The rituals at the Day of Atonement foreshadow what God will do at the end of time. And this we will study in week number 9 and 10. So what remains to be said? Well, best expressed, I guess, by the Jewish greeting on the Day of Atonement. It's Gmar Chatima Tova, which means a good final sealing. May your inscription in the book of life be sealed forever.